Hello, my name is Audrey Yeo. I'm a biostatistician and a software engineer. I will give you today a talk on the in Pharma 2024 on-demand talks entitled Gearing Our Industry Statisticians Up for Software Success, a Phase 1b Journey. It is a bit bold to suggest that statisticians with their already impressive skill set be asked to scale up even more. Or do I stand from an advantageous standpoint to see that statisticians in the pharma industry are well placed because of the efficiency gains that they themselves can see to make software? So I want to use phase 1b package as a testament for the conditions we can give industry statisticians and beyond, such as the skills and culture to make software successful. More importantly, I will tell you and explore with you my journey as a software engineer for the phase 1b as a testament that this is a path many statisticians can take. I will be very specific to the skills, knowledge, and habits and mindsets that I gained while establishing myself as a lead developer of the phase 1b. My opinions do not reflect that of my employer, and this presentation has as much as possible alt text and uses colorblind friendly templates. The code for this quarter rendered document will be also shared. So phase 1b is a product that calculates the Bayesian posterior probability of success or Bayesian posterior predictive posterior probability of success. It is used in early oncology trials because of the binary endpoints that are typical to this therapeutic area. However, any binary points can be also applied in this context. So we consider setting in a clinical trial where we have interim data and we would like to make a decision based on interim data such that we can go and expand our research or abandon a lost cause because of signals of lack of efficacy. Phase 1b is a facility that calculates these posterior probabilities of success or failure in a reproducible and testable way. I will just tell you about the history. It started 10 years ago in the Roche and Genentech organization. And I came in later, about 10 years later, to refactor, rename, and unit and integration test, as these are current state-of-art software engineering practices. This product is 100% written in R and it is open source. The goal is to submit it to CRAN. Please check it out yourself. This is how you can install, and this is the website. So I believe that clinical trial statisticians are well placed for the following reasons. They have the standpoint and vision of the scientific and business landscape of this specific medicine and the specific medicine in the competitive landscape of the therapeutic area. It is the business of the clinical trial statistician to know the roadblocks to their endpoints, such as operational context, more specifically recruitment rates and failures, the business assumptions that are made, and the strategies to get to their end goal. They are also part of the discussions about the ongoing learnings of the drug's pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. For example, if there's a suspected or if there is a latent drug effect, they understand the population at hand. If it's a rare disease that could affect recruitment rates, for example, and being in the forefront of the discussion at the business and the regulation side, they understand the expectations from health authorities and also the post-marketing needs. This as a whole, I believe and feel makes clinical trial statisticians well positioned to explore efficiency gains in what they do. As a background to show you my lens, my perspective, I graduated from the Masters of Biostatistics at the University of Zurich in 2020. I started at Roche headquarters in mid-2021, working in real-world data as a statistician. Then I joined the R&D department at Roche headquarters about a year later, where I was the project lead statistician in early oncology trials, where I had applied the methodology behind phase 1b. I also was a study statistician for phase 1 to phase 3 trials in other therapeutic areas such as neuroscience and hematology. 6 months into starting my role in the R&D department, I gave my first internal statistics presentation on decision gating, and the skills I already had coming in from university are programming, writing functions, version control. I had been exposed to the products of GitLab and GitHub before, and of course, presentation and communication skills. I started phase 1b about 1 year after starting at this R&D department within the same department as a rotation in the data science acceleration group. And 6 months after starting phase 1b, or if you like, 1.5 years after starting in the R&D department, or 2.5 years after graduation, I presented at the PSI, and the abstract for phase 1b also was accepted in the User R conference in 2024. So why did I choose to go from being a clinical trial statistician into software engineering? I will answer that question with a question. Why find solutions when we can also build them? I've always believed and felt that mathematics is an elegant field, and building software can be so inclusive and collaborative and creative. I also believe that this experiences in building software can bring everyone together to make great products and have an impact. I was first inspired to go on to the journey of phase 1b because of the work that I did as a project lead statistician, finding ways I can make my work more efficient. So we started with making spaghetti functions to create plots like this, where with the expression P open brackets more than 60%, I could express that visually. And this would be a starting point of conversation with business stakeholders who want to know if we recruited fully 40 patients in a small trial, how many patients do we need to respond to give us a signal based on our criteria of what a success looks like. So in this example, we are at interim at 23 patients. We've already had 16 responders. And if we would go to final, 32 out of 40 patients who respond to this treatment would be our success criteria. And that satisfies the above expression of the probability of the response rate being greater than 60%, which could be a standard of care, or which could be a competitive response rate for the therapeutic area landscape based on data, is more than 60%. So that's our success criteria. And what I like about this cumulative distribution function is that the red dots become green dots. So the red light becomes a green light, so a green traffic light. So it's a go criteria. And the skills needed to start developing a package from a clinical trial statistician included these. I want to show you the syllabus I received. So onboarding started about June and July 2023. The coding style of R, how to write good functions, what are the practices, the tools for debugging, and the other stuff are called advanced. So basic package development R, using Roxygen 2, and generally good software engineering practices. For me, coming out of university in 2020, the gaps were doing my first Git merge, doing my first pull request, styling, debugging, and writing tests, which I found really, really fun. We'll get to that later. So it was for me, new beginnings, new skills. That was very exciting. I learned how to visualize branches. We used Git Kraken, and then we went for a more cost-efficient option, VS Code Git Graph extension. And I personally like to use the console to navigate between branches. And after I started using VS Code Git Graph extension, I went back to the console. I felt that was more intuitive for me. Checking, I learned about pre-commit checks, GitHub checks, and RCMP. Those were new for me. Documentation using Oxygen 2, how to build and how to review them. Testing is a new, unique perspective for me, to go from the person who reviews the code and tries to see like how they can break it, and then how I would, as a developer, would make tests to make it resistant to my code breaking or giving a funny result. So the aim is always to make a product that gives excellent, reproducible, accurate results every time we use it, and is also delightful to use. It's important for me to make my work look neat, so I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, or I learned about styler and prettier packages. And so I remember being my lead developer at the time, mentioning to my boss what this work is. And Daniel, the lead engineer at the time, said that it was like polishing an ancient cup, an antique cup. And so we would refer to the functions that were there 10 years ago as vintage functions, to separate the old version and the new version when we were comparing the results they were giving, if they were different, for example. So this is an example of a bowl from the late 19th, 20th century. As you can see, it looks very new and looks very nice and polished. And that's what we were making phase 1b, an old package becoming a new package. The tools for refactoring included Roxygen. So this is a template for Roxygen. And as you can see here, there's type. So we wanted to ensure that each argument was also checked for its type. So that's more precise than using params where you just check for the value. So the other tools is checkmate, when we are checking for the assertions, if they are true, and test that as well. So in my definition, debugging is to find a needle in the haystack, but systematically. I feel it takes the most time and is the most difficult. It needs a lot more courage than creativity to go in there and really, really be very precise as to what did I do to get this result or lack of result. And I think it really does maintain humility. Embracing small steps are important, and making PRs as small as possible is a good strategy. There were so many things to remember: styling, the Roxygen template, formatting, testing, asserting each argument, and then creating test files and example files, and only creating test files for the helper functions, but not example files. So I decided that instead of being reminded every time, I would just put them in a checklist. So this is like a 2-page long checklist where I would use every time I started on a new small sizable PR. And I would check, number one, is there a design document for this entire user-facing function? And then I would pick the smallest task from that and make that one branch and one PR pull request. And the respective helper and example files if relevant. So I want to comment a bit on the design document because I feel that it's the most important and well-spent investment, because once there is a goal as to what this purpose of this function is, then the form comes. For me, this is a very small picture, but it's an RMD file. I want to show that it's an RMD file. It starts with a list of inputs where I can test my functions later on. And it helps create this clarity to help make all the little helper functions align with the user-facing functions, align to what we want the user to have as a facility. In that, I'm able to test regular and edge cases, but that also means that I've created most of the skeleton of this entire user-facing functions. I've already made tests and examples in there. So that's why I feel the design document is a nice scratch space to align the purpose of making this user-facing function in the first place. And is also a place where you can kind of iterate your ideas with your collaborators, like what are we actually doing with this function here? And it is itself a PR. So I celebrate everything. My first PR was merged on August 29, 2023. And by the end of that year, we submitted an abstract at the Statisticians conference for the pharma industry, PSI. And we went to Netherlands. That was nice. So I want to show you the journey in pull requests. And this is the order of the work from 1 to 20, but there are way more in 1 year. I just wanted to make it short. So the first one was test for D beta binal. The names are not important, but the number is important for the next couple of slides. I want to show you the journey in commits. So the smaller numbers are the earlier PRs, and you can see that the earlier phase of my work in phase 1b in my development as a software engineer required more iterations. And of course, this is confounded by whether we had stand-up meetings face-to-face, or whether the function was uncomplicated, or whether there was a lot of alignment needed on what the user-facing function is actually doing. But you can see that the checklist worked, that me trying to make habit of all these good practices in general worked. Commits as a proxy for iteration. Now we're using chats. Of course, confounded as well. Me and the lead engineer was having face-to-face meetings or online meetings, or whether one was on holiday, et cetera, but the smaller numbers tend to have a larger area in this mosaic plot. There were more chats in the maybe more difficult PRs and the more earlier PRs. So the checklist was an efficient tool I made for myself for creating habit in good engineering practices. The features of this kind of work, I feel collaboration is really important, if not as a must, because there are just so many moving parts. We already know that because helper functions they exist, and some user-facing functions depend on them, and some other user-facing functions share similar helper functions and build on each other. So there's a lot of moving parts, and then there's the question of styling and testing, etc. It is important, like I said before, to take a reviewer's perspective for making tests, but go between the forest and the trees perspective of like, does the overall purpose of the function meet or align with what we're exactly doing in this line of code or in this chunk of code? So going from the forest and the tree perspective. I think this work requires focus and deep thinking, and we can only create conditions for that. Small steps are good starts. It is important to already have really good foundations of R and writing functions, and then creative work comes after that foundation is there. Systematic deduction is key to debugging. What I like about this work is the opportunity to learn about lots of methodology and to really build them. That's really fun. and to try to find efficiencies in building them too. I'm always learning about that. And as mentioned before, good engineering practices are habits. They need automation, which needs practice, which needs time. I think it's important to remember that time is a huge factor in this development. I took the liberty to show you some good practices. And I think the aim is always to habituate them, improve the muscle memory, and to allow ourselves to collaborate. The mindset is that being dependent on others in this work is normal. Asking questions are key because there are also a lot of moving parts. Group chats are valuable, especially if there's a safe space to ask any questions. Regular stand-ups helps me. It's very easy to forget this tiniest problem that you had the day before. So I had stand-ups every day, and sometimes every 2 days, and I would cancel them ahead of time if I didn't have any questions. But sometimes it's also good to do stand-ups without questions, and to be allowed to just say out loud what you're doing, because we can also find new ideas from that. Small steps are good starts, and systematic steps, no matter how slow, are also can also be efficiency gains. I use older PRs to, track historically what errors I would make, try to learn and reflect and put that in a checklist, and then use the checklist. I felt after 9 months, I could kind of remember most things in the checklist, but I think if I'm not working on this every single day, I would need a checklist. And I still use the checklist. It's been like nearly 2 years. So from the engineering lead's perspective, with the goal in mind to introduce good practices for the new starter and to help them improve their muscle memory and to help them empower them to collaborate, I think patience is underrated, but it's so valuable. I benefited from that. We all learn in different ways because it's so easy to forget the tiniest problem from yesterday or from this morning. The quick turnover of feedback was important for me to develop. So the quick turnover, like on GitHub chats, PR reviews. Positive feedback is so important, and it must always be based on facts. Chats in the PR can be a learning tool that's listed in the Google playbook of good software engineering practices, but it's also useful, I find, because you can give very precise feedback. The stand-ups are useful for me to watch the lead engineer do their own systematic deduction. Part of this is learning how to think about the problem. Acknowledging learning styles can be different, and I benefited a lot from being able to do the work myself. Of course, the lead developer can do this in a faster as well, but what's the point of that if I'm not developing, if I'm not being given the opportunity of developing? So I got to make my own mistakes. I got to do the work, and I did do the work. I did. And being reminded about the rationale, I think that was very helpful for me to develop. So those are the conditions of success, and there's more. I think humans always have a lot of biases, but the win-win situation is always a positive bias. Trust only comes with time, so I feel it's important to have a positive bias at the start, and it's great if trust comes from the start. So I believe positive bias and trust are win-win situations. We should try that out more often. Learning through mistakes is key. I can't stress this enough, that I have to make mistakes to learn, and I'm allowed to make mistakes to learn. I'm allowed to ask repeat questions. And it is also important to know that even seasoned engineers do this. They need to collaborate, they need to ask questions, they need to ask someone to check what is going wrong with their code when they spend 4 hours on it and they can't figure it out. I think those things can be normalized. These are the kinds of feedback I received. Great motivation to learn new skills. It was always fun and easy to work with Audrey. So if you want to collaborate on phase 1b with me, let me know. Contacts at the end. So I also wanted to reflect on how I can be a better software engineer. I want to be slower at systematic deduction. I think there are efficiency gains because I know that this work is creative and requires a lot of deep thinking. I want to create conditions for that. I want to perceive small steps as good starts because we're in a world where fast is attractive. I want to be able to start slowly without feeling like I'm being left behind. I want to continue to have an open mind on what good practices are. What I've shown you can change in 5 years, and I want to be open to that. I want to be more patient with the process of developing software, and when in doubt, fall on engineering principles such as testing, debugging, iteration, making the code reliable, and always having correct results. So I am touring phase 1b. So we were in Netherlands, we were in Salzburg, we were in Basel for the FUSE conference. We'll be at the University of Basel at the end of this year. Early next year, we'll be in Berlin for a Bayesian lecture. And this was all because I started this journey on phase 1b. So there are more issues to solve on the GitHub, and we want to submit it to the CRAN. As a lead developer, I want to make this kind of work or this kind of collaboration inclusive, diverse, and impactful, and creating a user experience that is delightful. So in all honesty, doing something I wasn't prepared to do paid off. I got to have so much fun making and building products. There were always some new skills to gain, but it was always confidence through competence. I used the opportunity to learn a different programming language, Julia. You can see my blog post, and me and a few other people at Roche gave a 6 months course on Julia, which included machine learning tutorials and Quarto tutorials. It's always important to have this lifelong learning attitude, because no matter how much you improve it, it's not permanent. Something could change, and you'd have to learn more. But I always pride myself with making work that is good quality, includes everyone. So thank you to the lead engineer, Daniel Sabanés Bové, for this wonderful opportunity for myself to stretch and for me to build a product that I'm proud of, that continuously improves. I want to thank my colleagues at the Data Science Acceleration at Roche headquarters in Basel and in Welland and in the States for their patience, for the answers that they promptly answered on the chat. I also want to shout out to the open source community who share the great work that they do and help each other grow. And I'd like to know if this presentation relates to you and how. So please reach out on LinkedIn or my website. And I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you have a lot of fun in the R in Pharma 2024. Thank you for the R in Pharma to host me. I look forward to hearing all the other talks. Thank you.